CBC News Decision Desk has looked at all the numbers and they are ready to make a call. There it is, Ontario. The CBC is projecting a PC majority government, a rare three-peat, a feat not seen since back in 1959.
This election, we asked the people for a mandate. A strong mandate that outlives and outlasts the Trump administration. A mandate to do whatever it takes to protect Ontario. Well, friends, the people have spoken.
Not even 10 minutes after polls close and the Progressive Conservatives were projected to form yet another majority government. And this is significant. It is the first time the party has won 3 consecutive majorities in more than half a century. Tonight's win will make Doug Ford the Premier of Ontario until 2029. All right, let's go straight to Lorenda Redekop now, who is at the PC party headquarters. Lorenda, Doug Ford and the PCs getting that three-peat. What was the atmosphere like?
That's right, Kelda. Well, first I'm going to just describe this atmosphere around me now, because this does not look, I realize, like the headquarters for the winning team, but that's what we get. It was a lightning-fast decision in terms of the projected winner, and they are tearing down very quickly. And that's because this is a banquet hall where the next group actually takes over this room at 4 a.m. And so the supporters, they got out very quickly. And even the balloon drop that happened, most of those balloon remnants, they've all been popped, and most of them are already swept away. The big screens that said Protect Ontario, those are in the midst of being taken down as well. But certainly there were lots of loud cheers when it was announced that Doug Ford would continue as the Premier of Ontario, having that third straight majority mandate. And when he came out to speak to supporters, thunderous applause. We heard that campaign theme song and also his message. He repeatedly talked about U.S. President Donald Trump. And some of the things that got the loudest applause, he talked about how Donald Trump thinks he can break us. He doesn't know what we know. He said that Canada won't start a fight with the U.S., but Ford said, you better believe that we are ready to win one. And he also talked about unity and how all of Canada, all of Ontario needs to be on the same side during this fight against those proposed tariffs. And he was also gracious. He thanked all of the other party leaders. He named them. And he said, while they may disagree on policy, he knows that each one of them loves the province and loves the country. Here's a bit more from Premier Doug Ford.
I hope I've proven I will work with anyone, I will work with everyone to get things done. Now, as we stare down the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs, I will continue to do just that. I will work with every level of government and every political stripe, because fighting back against Donald Trump, standing up for Canada, it will take a full Team Ontario effort. It will take a full Team Canada effort.
Well, Doug Ford does get a third majority mandate. At this point, it looks like he will have fewer seats than he had after the previous election. And we had heard from Ford, him saying that he wanted a stronger mandate. And so no doubt there will be some questions asked about that. We know that he is expected to speak to media tomorrow. We're not sure what time. So definitely me, as well as other reporters, we will be asking those types of questions. We also heard from Ford in his speech talking about what this mandate will look like. He mentioned some of the things that have come up during his campaign. He talked about that tunnel under the 401, wanting to build that, talking about also some policies that are very popular with his supporters, but controversial with others. Things like cleaning up encampments, safe injection sites. He also said he wants wants to bring sanity back to bike lanes. One of those areas where he is going into what is normally municipal powers and wanting the province to have some power there. So we do expect to hear from him tomorrow. As you can see, this room, it's being cleaned up now. And I am told, though, that party staffers, they are having their victory party, but elsewhere. Kelda?
Yeah, they got out of there quickly. Thanks so much, Lorenda. Now, while the Conservatives won another majority, not a lot is going to be changing within the leadership at Queen's Park. NDP leader Marit Stiles holding on to her Davenport seat, and the party itself will stay on as the official opposition.
In another few years, we are gonna face a rematch. And I'm there for it, my friends.
The NDP performing better than expected in this election, managing to hold a strong opposition. And this was Stiles' first election as party leader.
People counted us out. They said the Ontario Liberal Party was dead. Huh. Tonight, you prove them wrong.
Not the night the Liberals were hoping for, winning 14 seats. Not enough to take over as official opposition and just barely got enough to reestablish official party status. But they have managed to do at least that after being without party status since 2018. And meanwhile, Bonnie Crombie losing her Mississauga riding to the PCs. And her sons introduced her tonight, saying she will be the next Premier of Ontario.
Together, we held Doug Ford's feet to the fire. And delivered for our communities. And so I look forward to teaming up with you again to go back to Queen's Park and represent green voices across this province.
They came in with 2 and they leave with 2. Green Party leader Mike Schreiner handily winning his seat in Guelph, while Ashlyn Clancy, who won a Kitchener Centre by-election in 2023, also holds on to her seat. The Greens had hoped to pick up a 3rd seat in Parry Sound, Muskoka, but the PC candidate there and the incumbent, Graydon Smith, is holding that riding. Now, a lot to unpack. Our senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley, is here with us. And Mike, Doug Ford had said that this election was all about getting a stronger mandate. He didn't really get that this time. So what questions need to be asked?
Look, the bottom line is Doug Ford won the election. And in fact, he won a 3rd straight majority, and no premier in Ontario has done that since the late 1950s. So you can't take away from Doug Ford's victory. His party strategists made the decision to go for this early election. They felt that was their best shot at winning, and they won. And so I think there will be some questions asked about the campaign and the fact that we had this election and that Doug Ford did not increase the size of his majority. But they still won and will be able to do what they want to do with this new mandate, 4 years of a PC majority at Queen's Park.
And it was a decisive majority. There was some talk at the beginning of the campaign that they might pick up like over 90 seats, though, right?
Yeah, so it isn't the big number that they were looking for. And I even heard today, Kelda, that Doug Ford himself was actually hoping for 96 seats, which would have been the absolute most ever in an Ontario election. So short of that, and definitely didn't increase in total the size of their presence at Queen's Park.
Let's talk about Bonnie Crombie and the Liberal Party. Not a great night for them. And this is the 2nd straight election where the leader, who has some name recognition, has lost their seat even. So what does that say about the status of the party?
There will be some questions about Bonnie Crombie's leadership. I mean, during the course of the night, I was getting texts from some Liberals. Those who were really with Bonnie Crombie are saying, she stays on. She said in her speech she stays on as leader, but it's really hard to lead an opposition party when you don't have a seat. So I also heard from some Liberals that said, look, the mayor of Mississauga can't win her own seat, can win in a riding in Mississauga, and doesn't help the party win other seats in Mississauga. So, you know, there are some criticisms of Bonnie Crombie right now. And you heard it in her speech, just how disappointed she was.
Yeah.
You know, I said, this is got to be the most difficult speech that Bonnie Crombie has ever made in her political career.
And finally, the NDP doing what some would say better than expected in this election, right?
Yeah, I mean, so much of it is about expectation, Keldy. You know, you really got it that. And Marit Stiles, their overall numbers in the polls were not great. Like their share of the vote, but they won where they needed to win. They won a lot of close ridings. They did very well in the north. And so I think there's a couple of things that went on there. The PCs really tried to target a bunch of NDP ridings, you know, in places like Windsor, in London, in St. Catharines, in the north. And the PCs weren't generally able to break through in those cases. And I think then there's Marit Stiles' leadership. You know, she gave quite a speech tonight. You know, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, very strong, setting herself up to be the leader of the official opposition at Queen's Park, talking about what a big job that is going to be. So, relatively speaking, a good night for the NDP, even though they didn't win.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. Our senior Queen's Park reporter, Mike Crawley. Welcome back. Ontario is reporting 84 new measles cases over the last 2 weeks, nearly doubling the province's total count since an outbreak started last fall.
This multi-jurisdictional outbreak, however, did originate due to an exposure in New Brunswick that resulted in an outbreak affecting both New Brunswick and Ontario.
The new cases bring Ontario's total this year to 119, plus a probable 23 cases. Almost all of the new cases are connected to an interprovincial outbreak that began in October, which has sickened 177 people in Ontario. 18 children in the province have been hospitalized with measles, including one who required intensive care. The head of Pride Toronto say they're losing sponsors. The organization has lost funding from 3 corporations, something Pride Toronto suspects is connected to backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the U.S. Ali Chiasson has more.
Among the reasons some companies gave Pride Toronto for pulling their funding this year include a change in mandate. The executive director of Pride Toronto says that sounds a lot like what American companies have been saying since President Trump signed an executive order to end DEI programs.
All of this started happening after January. So we were able to sort of put the dots together.
We're going to stop the destructive and divisive diversity, equity, and inclusion.
We're seeing corporate sponsorships get cut. So, for example, Pride Toronto being a key area where organizations were once very loud and proud to support, you know, putting their logos on all of the marketing collateral, changing their logos or social media presence to display the flag, where they might not be as willing to do that anymore.
This diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant says it's not just about events being out money, but the message it sends to the people who work at those companies.
I worry not only for the Pride Festival, which is such a beacon of love and light in our community and something that, you know, Canadians hold very dear. I'm afraid for what this means for folks who are already feeling alone and marginalized in society and inside of our organizations.
Modeste isn't naming names in saying which 3 corporate sponsors pulled their funding from Pride because they're still hoping they change their mind. 2 companies were gold sponsors, each supplying $150,000. The other was good for $100,000, enough for Pride to have to cancel some signature programming.
The reason why I still have some hope is that oftentimes the US-based companies that work both in the US and Canada, the Canadian side tend to take a different spin on things. And I'm hoping that the Canadian way of life, the Canadian politics will shift from what we're seeing happening in the US, and that they will come back to the table to have some conversations with us.
I encourage Canadian organizations to come forward and to talk about how they're staying the course, how they continue to be steadfast in their commitment to progressing equity, diversity, and inclusion.
We reached out to Pride Toronto's sponsors, and several responded saying they're proud to continue to support Pride Toronto, including Rogers, Air Canada, Smirnoff, and Tim Hortons. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
A driver is dead after a single vehicle rollover on Highway 407 in Markham this morning. It happened around 10 in the eastbound lane near Kennedy Road. The OPP say the driver was the only person in the vehicle. He was pronounced dead at the scene. All eastbound and westbound lanes on the 407 were closed between Woodbine and Warden for much of the day while the OPP investigated. Mayor Olivia Chow has assembled an economic action team to combat Trump's tariffs. The group met at City Hall this afternoon, just hours after Trump said a 25% tariff will go ahead on most Canadian goods on March 4th. Tyler Cheese has the latest.
Today we are united as Torontonians, as Canadians.
Mayor Olivia Chow has brought together a special task force to look into how the city can fight Trump's tariffs.
Stronger together. So here to help you and here to help our community.
The group includes leaders in industries like trade, housing, and energy, as well as several members of city staff.
Hardworking Torontonians are wondering, is their livelihood going to be at stake? Will the price of everything goes up? And it's already very high for a whole lot of people. Would it go higher? And as the U.S. once again consider imposing tariff, we are united in a Team Canada approach to respond to this senseless trade action.
But as a small business community,
she feels there's a lot the city can do to push back.
We have the biggest city in the country. We are the economic engine. As I said earlier, we are the global beacon of hope. And we have Torontonians that wants to fight this.
Other members of the group say gathering this team will help other levels of government to better understand the impacts of the tariffs.
Our economy is so integrated with the U.S. economy right now that understanding all of the impacts in each of the sectors is going to be a very hard thing for those governments at the macro level to quickly know and be able to respond.
Meanwhile, Toronto businesses like this one have been preparing under the threat of tariffs for weeks.
I reached out to every single supplier where I had made orders and said, you know, we will make our decision about whether we're going forward in March when we find out more about the tariffs. So now is this point where we have to look at all those orders and decide if we're going to take any. Can you add this to that shipment for me?
She says the tariffs won't make or break her business, but it will take a hit.
About 10% of our customers are American. So we're actually in, I know we're very fortunate compared to a lot of other businesses. 10% is, you know, if we lose that entire 10%, we will still be okay. But nevertheless, it will hurt.
She's also worried about the overall economic impact of tariffs, especially if they're long-lasting. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
And you are looking live at Toronto, Ottawa, Windsor, and Collingwood tonight. Now, the city of Toronto is expecting some snow to hit the city overnight. Still ahead, our Colette Kennedy will break down the forecast and what could be another cold weekend ahead. Stay with us. All right, Colette joins us now with a look at the forecast. And Colette, we have another storm system coming through that could make for some messy conditions going into the weekend.
Yeah, here we go again,
Yeah.
right? I know, and you know, issues tomorrow morning before the system even gets here, because we're going to have the temperatures really dropping off tonight, and with that it means some of the melt again from today freezing back up. So untreated surfaces are going to be slippery, and then you can see we're getting some amplification in our jet stream here, some stronger winds, and with that troughing, this is going to be driving in this next system, another Alberta Clipper coming on through. It will move quickly. That could help a little bit in terms of the accumulations, but a winter weather travel advisory in place for Friday, 5 to 10 centimeters, and a little further north, it's a snowfall warning because that 5 to 10 becomes 10 to 15 centimeters, and into eastern Ontario, also some heightened amounts there. So the timing, because it's moving so quickly towards us, I think will be dry for the morning commute, other than the slippery areas if they're not treated that I mentioned, but then we'll get the snow developing closer into the lunch hour, but it becomes heavier as the day wears on and as we get towards that afternoon and evening commute. So whether you're just trying to get home from work or you're actually trying to get away out of town for the weekend, you could find things really slow on the roadways as the day wears on, and even into the evening in the GTA, we will still be dealing with this, okay? It begins to ease as we go through the overnight hours on Friday, and then we get a bit of mixing in here with a milder temperature, but on the backside, some stronger winds on Saturday, and yes, even a little bit of lake effect, so some flurries back in the forecast on Saturday. This particular model putting us in that 5 to 10 centimeters, a little bit heavier, especially north of Barrie, so once you get towards Midland, Parry Sound, Huntsville, through those regions. But as I just roll that forward, taking you into Saturday evening, there could be some lake enhancement because of some strong southwesterly winds, and so that might bump up a few of the totals. All right, -8 tonight, 1 tomorrow, okay, with those stronger winds out of the south-southwest, and then look at the colder air that is going to be pushing in. So we haven't been used to this. As we move into March, we're going to have some very cold nights, and we have to wait till Tuesday till things warm back up again above freezing for us.
So it goes. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
Finally tonight, an exciting mission for SpaceX. Its Falcon 9 rocket blasted off from Kennedy Space Center last night, sending 2 important payloads on journeys to the moon.
3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff. Go Falcon, go.
The first is a lunar lander named Athena that's set to touch down near the moon's south pole next Thursday and operate for around 10 days. The company behind the lunar lander made history last year as the first private company to successfully land on the moon. Also heading to the moon is NASA's Lunar Trailblazer satellite. Its mission? To search for water. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night, everyone.